What is the love of money? The love of money is pride. And what is pride? Pride is the subversion of God's authority in favor for your own authority.
I think central banking is the love of money, right? Almost like the institutionalized love of money.
That's why I think that distinction is so important, because the real problem is not the state. The real problem is the evil that the state does.
Money printing is theft. No one wants to hold money someone else can print. Bitcoin is money no one else can print.
There are many, many people either that are Christians, that are not properly understanding the gospel, or just as common, if not more common, people that are not Christians that think that's what all Christians believe.
Typically, you just have to flee the country with whatever's on your back. But now you could flee the country with, a lot of purchasing power on your brain.
The minority of the planet is rich.
Yes. Right.
And Bitcoin's promise, or Bitcoin's vision, is that the majority of the planet becomes rich.
How do you communicate to people that they are indeed not too late to Bitcoin? Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the WiM Startup Accelerator could be for you. WiM is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, WiM brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's WOLF, WOLFNYC.com.
To me, this year feels very different than last year.
Yeah.
Probably security is a big part of that, but I've just seen so many random people walking around with 1 to 6 bodyguards or whatever, clearly bodyguards. And so it's just weird. I have the sense that there's a lot of money here that, we don't know, which I didn't feel last year. So I don't know.
Well,
do you have any impressions?
There's at least, twice as much money here as there was last year, right?
Right.
At least.
Probably more like five times.
I don't know. It's an election year, recent assassination attempt. I think this is like the process of Bitcoin maturing. These events are going to feel different every year.
Yeah.
I even have, I have a security guy this year too. Just because
you have a security guy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just don't know. I mean, I've never had anything short of a purely loving interaction at these events. It's almost always people, thank you so much. I love this, love your work, blah, blah, blah. But our
bodies are a single point of failure.
Well, it's in real life is the opposite of what you see online. It's like online people just talk shit. They'll just talk shit because there's no consequences to talking shit. But no one has ever said a cross word to me in my face. So I don't know. You see it, I guess, all year online, and then they're like, well, I guess I should take a security guard this year because I've got friends with me. I've got people with me that I care about. And if any of these weirdos show up, then, you want it to be dealt with properly and in a way that doesn't get you legally entangled in something. So, but I don't know. I think there's something here that I can't, it's like another rabbit hole I want to go into. I've kind of talked about it with people, this guest on this trip, but this line between social media and reality and how it's blurring, and people start to think social media is reality. Like when I'm embroiled in a social media controversy, people are sending me messages like, are you okay? Like, is everything all right?
Well, I did. I'm one of those guys.
Can I help you? Like, can I send you? And I'm like, it's just people saying shit online.
Right.
Like this is the least thing I've ever been through adversity wise in my life. Like on terms, the scale of adversity, this is well near the bottom.
Right.
Like people saying mean shit about me online. I've had, I've had the shit kicked out of me by like 10 guys simultaneously. Like I would put that nearer the top. That's when I would say, people checking in is like a legitimate concern. But we start to see, like we see it online. If I see you getting ganged up online or mobbed online, then we're not, I don't know, you're just not engaging with the whole truth in a way. But we're all decomplexifying the world through social media, but then we might start to mistake social media for the world. And I don't know. It's a weird thing to talk about.
We were just talking about before you came in. I had heard they were both Christians, and we were talking about this kind of weird world we're going to, right? Where kind of like you're saying, the lines are blurred. People, I mean, as you know, that was the first thing I talked about in Bitcoin, because like both from the Bitcoin perspective, but then a culture faith perspective, it's like technology is changing us so fast, and I'm just. Do you guys have kids? No. Okay, so I don't have kids either, but you have one, and I don't know. I don't even have kids yet, but I just wonder sometimes, like, I'm going to be raising them in a world that you're raising her, in a world that didn't exist for you.
And it's how do you like? I had Scott Melker in here yesterday. He has 2 children, older. I think they're girls, like 9 range, and he's already like, how do you manage their access to social media?
Right.
It's like, because other kids in school have it, so if you just take it away and you play the authoritarian, well, then your children are going to be upset or resent you.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want them to have unfettered access, because there's creeps and all kinds of weird shit online. So it's like, and you don't want regulation or government intervention managing that. That seems like something that's much more of a hands-on parental thing. So we're just having to figure it out, basically. It's this uncontrolled social experiment that parents and kids and all of us are just sort of thrown into.
Yeah.
And you're a little bit younger than me, but I'm like, I didn't get this. I didn't get the smartphone until I was 25 years old. I was a little bit late to the game, I guess. I don't know, maybe I got the iPhone 3 or 4. But I didn't even get the cell phone flip phone until I went to college. So I was like 18 years old. So I'm that last generation that remembers the time before, or one of the last generations before all this.
And I'm going to be the last generation that remembers before Bitcoin.
Right.
Or maybe younger than me, but right, trust everything.
Yeah. Have you read anything about Rene Girard's work on mimetic desire?
I have read a few articles because we talked about this last time. I did read maybe 3 or 4 articles about it. Very, very interesting. I haven't done any further reading though. Yeah. Basically, that the things that we value and desire are the things that we see other people do, like monkey see, monkey do. Yeah. Like you want the iPhone. Well, now I want the iPhone, right?
Yes.
That kind of idea.
Yeah, that, and then I think a little more broadly, we are just imitative, and like the actual ways we act, the expressions we have, the way we say things, even the ways we think, the ways we articulate, we actually get from one another. And I find this in myself. Like there's some things that I'll say a certain way, and I'm like, if I reflect on it, I'm like, oh, I remember seeing my friend say that same thing the same way 10 years ago, and it's like a subroutine that I picked up and install into my software, and we're just constantly picking up these little subroutines in all of our interactions.
Right.
Obviously, the younger you are, the more impressionable you are.
Right.
Whereas the older you get, the more, I guess, you become less influenced and more of an influencer over as you age. Right.
Right.
In general.
I'm really grateful because I'm in Bitcoin world. I feel I'm like on the way young end of the spectrum. I mean, only Gen Z for BTC, who's 14. Like he's the only kid I know here younger than me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think both of your guys are older than me. Yeah.
How old are you?
25.
25.
Yeah. So like, in the Bitcoin podcast world, I'm definitely one of the youngest, if not the youngest. And I feel very grateful because I wonder if I was any older, I probably would have been married, probably have kids. I probably gotten, farther along in my career. I probably would have been distracted and I would have neglected Bitcoin for another 5 years. So I would have had less money if I was older. But then if I was any younger, I would have been more impressionable, like you were just saying. And, I really appreciate when people come up and take photos with me. I mean, you get it, right? I mean, it's very nice. But, my background in the film world, I met a lot of, frankly, actors and film people, directors and actors mostly, those two, just being on the screen and feeling like you would, like it would just mess with people's heads, right? Even if it never became public, you could just tell that in their own personal lives that, like, distort relationships a little bit. So anyway, I mean, yeah, your point about being impressionable when you're younger, it's something I think about very often. I'm very grateful that God, for whatever reason, had me right at that age sweet. Like if I was 2 years older, I don't know. If I was 2 years younger, I don't know. Like, I mean, you know, so yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, I only brought that up because, and again, I don't have fully formed thoughts around this, but it seems like these digital technologies have lowered the barriers to mimesis or to imitation, so that now, you know, we all have windows into the lives of one another globally.
Right.
And so you see certain people becoming very influential on social media, and then other people will just imitate their behaviorisms. Whereas in like pre-social media paradigm, there were much fewer people that were influencing a much larger set of people, right? A few athletes, few celebrities, whatever. And I guess you could say it's a much more centralized mimetic model, whereas in social media we have a more decentralized mimetic model. And I feel like maybe that is what's creating such an upheaval. It's like we are adapting to this new world where everyone's a broadcaster and a consumer. Yeah. And the waves of imitation just move more quickly and chaotically, something like that. Yeah. And I don't know, just going through it is a trip, especially when you're in the middle of it and you see people, like especially a community that prides itself on don't trust, verify. Right. And they'll just pick up a lie and run with it. Yeah. And they'll just run, and you'll just sit there. And I'll sit there for a week and I won't say a word. I'm like, is anyone going to verify? Yep. And then after it's verified, someone will come out and, oh no, this is actually not true. Whatever was in an uproar about. The people that were propagating the message or the lie, they don't retract, right? They don't say, oh, I was wrong.
Because the lie dies away in the 40-hour news cycle.
If it bleeds, it leads kind of thing. Right. And people are just so thirsty for engagement. They will say anything and everything. Yep. They don't give a shit if it's the truth, fault, like anywhere in between. Whatever gets the clicks or the views or the engagement, that's what they want. And so is that just the new world we live in? Or is this a fiat problem? Or is this, how does Bitcoin fix that? You know, like all these questions come to mind.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's a fiat problem. I think it's a, well, why, I mean, fiat problem is a fiat problem because of human greed. And I think, you know, fiat maybe lowers the incentive to greed, but I don't know. I think there are, you know, and we'll talk. Have we started, by the way?
We always just started.
Okay,
we're blurring the lines between truth and reality.
I know. I kind of just realized
where does it end? Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we just we sat down. We just started talking. Yeah. So right. Speaking of blurred lines, it is weird. To your point. Yeah. I guess I should finish up my.
Take your time.
My point.
Whenever we want.
We're filming this in the mid morning, so I'm a bit hungry. But your point about blurring reality, I think, is really true because making the videos, making the content. I make a lot of videos, and I have a lot of conversations with people, on camera, off camera, and what I like about the Bitcoiners is that personality-wise and ethos-wise, they're very consistent on camera, off camera. It's one of the favorite compliments people give me. He's like, "Oh wow, Luke, you're just like you are on camera." I'm like, "Thank you." But I don't know if we were recording when you said at the very beginning of when we were talking. So it may not have been recorded, but I think you said something that was really spot on about how I forget how you said it, but social media is truth, but it's like the selective truth, and the selective truth might be deceitful, right? And so I wonder about me sometimes is that, people watch my videos. Many people have watched, dozens of hours of me. They probably watch hundreds of hours of you and 1,000 hours of Saylor, right? And I am intentionally selecting what I record, how I act, how I post it. And, frankly, there are a lot of people that just aren't good on camera. And if someone's not good on camera, we typically view it as a bad thing, as a lack of a skill. But at the same time, like I feel like I'm at the point, and you probably feel at the point too, where it's like the line is so blurred that it's like I don't even really know if we're going, right? I don't know if we're going or not, if someone's filming or not. I mean, So, maybe it's a skill to be good on camera, but at the same time, maybe you've lost some intuition, right? I mean, when cameras just came out way back in the olden days, people thought it was going to steal their soul or whatever. And then people thought that it was going to, mess with the, it's like we had fear with it and then it changed us. And that's not to say the photograph's bad. It's just to say that everything's a trade-off.
No.
And what's the trade-off with that one technology?
Yeah, and it does point to the ways in which technologies condition our behaviors or new behaviors, right? I'm an introverted person. When I've always been uncomfortable on camera my whole life. Like, someone turns on the camera and you're instantly like a little bit frozen or rigid in your movements. So this is actually a very uncomfortable thing for me to do. Initially, it was like start having these conversations, but I had reached this point in really my Bitcoin journey where it was like, okay, whatever Bitcoin needs, I considered myself as an employee of Bitcoin, basically.
Right.
So whatever the market is telling me, the Bitcoin market, right, is saying, oh, we like the way you write. We like the way you appear on podcast.
Right.
Give us more of that.
Right.
That was my signal to just do that, whatever it is, even if I don't like it or am uncomfortable with it. And there's a lot of truth to that saying that when you do what you fear, fear disappears. Because I think just doing reps on camera every fucking day for years and years and years, eventually you're just like, okay, you're just conditioned to it, right? You can train yourself to just not worry about it as much. There's still a difference, like slightly. One of the reasons we got rid of the explicit formal intro on the show, I used to be like, hey, Luke, welcome to the What is Money show. And then when we would start talking, that created this very bright line, like it emphasized the divide between reality and podcast.
That's why I didn't know we started.
Exactly. So now we just don't do that, and it just flows right in. And so, I guess the intention behind that is to just try and blend those worlds a little bit better. And the other thing you notice, or I have noticed in doing these long form podcasts, is people open up over time. There's like one person you're talking to at hour 1. But if you get that same person to hour 3, they're like a different person, right? Like the artificiality or whatever of the experience has dissolved, and you're really just kind of if you're focusing on the ideas, then you're engaged in an authentic dialogue, and that's when the sparks really tend to fly, right? It becomes much more of a spectator sport with like two people kind of wrestling with one idea, and I think that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, I agree with that. And by the way, I think I texted this to you one time, but I really appreciate too the fact that you do these in person. As you know, I like to do them in person when I can, right? I've been very fortunate to travel a lot over the last 6 to 12 months or so, around the world, these Bitcoin conferences, and film a lot of stuff in person. And sometimes people have asked me, Luke, why do you do that? But it's like, because I don't know if we're going to do that in 5 years. Like, I mean, the ratio between in-person discussions and digital discussions is dramatically accelerating towards the digital discussions, right? Both for the individuals, the pleb, and then also for the content creator making it, right? And so I'm like, I want to go to these conferences now in 2023, 2024, when Bitcoin's not gone vertical because a Trump or a Kennedy or somebody's, pumping Bitcoin to the moon. I want to do these conversations now in person and like actually get to know the person in meet space in real life. Right? Because it's not the same. And so anyway, I appreciate that you and who else? Peter McCormick and a few other people really focus in Bitcoin, really focus on the in-person stuff. And I think the best podcasts in the world do that, right? I mean, who are the two biggest podcasters by far? Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, right? They both do their stuff, I think, exclusively in person. Is that right? But whatever the case, they do a lot in person. So
and there is, again, when I started this, because I'm an audio listener to podcasts, when I listen, it's usually just audio only. I don't sit there and watch the video. I just assumed that's how most people consumed podcasts, but it turns out when you create a very high production quality video podcast, the video numbers, I mean, you just see it, right? The market will tell you these YouTube videos are performing 500 to 1,000% better when it's in-person high production quality. And so that's what we've leaned into, right? Like we have the studio in Miami. We bring guests out. Obviously, we come to events like this. I don't know if we mentioned, we're at Bitcoin 24 in Nashville. So we get to do these in-person conversations with speakers and at the events like yourself. And the other thing that I've noticed is the energy is, again, there's a trade-off. On Zoom, when I have like my notes pulled up and the book we're talking about pulled up and I'm reading excerpts, the conversation tends to be a bit more cerebral, like you're really heady, but there's lack of interpersonal energy because, well, you're on Zoom, right? You're not getting all these nonverbal communication points, these data points of nonverbal communication that we just subconsciously transfer. Right. But when we're in person, it's a much more enacted, embodied kind of conversation. And that, I think, in retrospect now, that makes for a better conversation, actually. When you have two real people in a real room interacting as humans have been interacting for millions of years, it's just a lot more natural and authentic than talking to someone through a box, basically.
Yeah, if I could add something to there, because I don't know if a lot of people would know this. I mean, most people are smart. They probably would figure this out. But, I think a question someone would have in reaction to what you just said is, well, if the in-person podcasts are so much better and everybody loves them so much more, and they make 10 times as much money and get 10 times as many views, why doesn't everybody do them? But
they are more expensive.
Well, the problem is that they're more than 10 times more expensive. Zoom is free. Riverside is basically free, right? But this is like, people. People that haven't done a film production before don't realize how expensive a film production is, right?
That's right.
It's like all the stuff you gotta buy it or rent it. You gotta ship it. You gotta fly your people out here.
Yeah.
You gotta fly me out here. You gotta fly yourself out here. You gotta rent the room.
Hotels.
I mean, it adds up. Even if you're only adding the production on top of the conference, I mean, it's a lot. So, So anyway, all I have to say is that. I appreciate you put the work into doing this, because I know that it's not necessarily the most profitable, but I think well, maybe it is the most profitable on a long enough time horizon, but definitely in the short and midterm it's not.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. There is an investment on the front end where you're not going to see a recoup of that money, and you're betting on yourself and your guest and your the content, basically, that it will do better in the long run. Well,
your Saylor series, your first series, right? The series you did with Michael Saylor. It's like, I don't know what you think. Maybe you would disagree, but it's like, I don't know how many views that series got, but probably it's going to get more views in the next 4 years than it's gotten in these last 4 years, right? Like,
possibly, yeah.
Because you had a long-term time preference discussion that wasn't about the short-term news cycle, but it was Michael Saylor ranting about the next 5,000 years. So it's a long-term discussion, right? So it's going to probably have those long-term.
Yeah, I think so.
Results.
The views do continue to increase on that, and that I think that would be my one. Well, maybe I have more than one piece of advice for podcasting, but the big one is really focus on what you want to talk about and what you are genuinely curious about. Like, I can't tell you how much pressure I've had. A lot of paid things to do, like, hey, just do short-term news cycle stuff.
Right.
Pull up the news and then talk point by point by point by point. We'll broadcast you on these, different venues, and you'll get millions of views, and there'll be more people to your podcast, and we'll pay you. And like, there's been all these financial incentives to try and get very short-term, very news cycle focus. Right. Well, I don't enjoy it. Right. I don't care. I don't read the news. I want nothing to do with it. So I've turned it down and said, no, I'm just going to keep doing these long conversations that I actually think are interesting. Yeah. And I think so far that is the barometer for success in the content. Like, if I find the conversation interesting and engaging, then people tend to find it interesting and engaging. If I start faking that shit and I'm just having conversations to try and get as many eyes and ears on it as possible, I mean, I haven't tried it really, but I would assume the opposite would be true, right? It just wouldn't carry as much weight.
Yeah. That reminds me of something that I've thought about before. I don't know if I've talked about it online. I probably talked about it to myself, but I don't think I've talked about it online. But I've thought a lot about the attention and how that's like a fiat reality. It's almost like a proof for Bitcoin, because we live in this world where attention is the new money, attention is the new currency. Attention, actually, in many ways, is like the new global reserve asset.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in business, not literally, but it's like, I think it's interesting that companies don't want to save cash on the balance sheet. They want to invest in anything possible to get the eyeballs as much as possible, get as much time as possible, sell as much ad space as possible, right? Because it's like that you want to own the attention, because then no matter what happens to the currency or anything else, you own it. But I mean, it may not be entirely true, because we've always needed attention, right, to sell products and services. But I find that, to me, interesting, is that people criticize Bitcoin for saying, oh, Bitcoin's not tangible, Bitcoin's digital, I don't understand Bitcoin. And yet they're listening to a digital podcast, and there are multi-billion dollar corporations that basically wouldn't articulate it like that, but realize that, like, attention is the new, like, attention is what you want on the balance sheet, quote unquote, right? You don't want the dollars, and that's not only not digital, it doesn't exist. Like, you can't, right? It's like attention is a construct, I guess, right?
I did a talk, I don't know, a year or two ago, and that was one of my answers to what is money, is that money is an attention allocation technology. So when you go to work for money, right, you're actually going into an occupation and applying your attention to creating some good or service for other people, right? It's like a focused attention process. And then obviously, as a consumer, advertisers are spending money to try and get your attention to sell you products. But it is like the primary thing we have. We all only have kind of one fovea or focus or whatever this is called, and we have to collectively decide how to direct our individual foci towards productive ends for everyone.
Right.
And money is the coordination mechanism between a lot of that.
Right.
And money gets a lot of attention, right? Someone with a high net worth gets a lot of attention. Assets that have high prices or volatile prices, i.e. Bitcoin, get a lot of attention. It is the price of Bitcoin that draws people's attention in the first place, typically.
Yeah.
That's like the tip of the spear. And then if you pay attention, you might go down the rabbit hole. But a lot of people go away, right, when the price starts to go down.
Right.
So
that is very painful for me, like, personally. I mean, with the work I do, I don't know how much you remember, but so the two places I work in Bitcoin are Blockware, which is mining, Bitcoin mining, so hosted mining. And then the other one is the Bitcoin Advisor, where we help people with asset protection and, diversifying keys, right? I think you've been involved with that maybe a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't say that. But my point...
You guys are an affiliate of or I am an affiliate of yours, recommending your product for custody is what I was...
Right. Multi-sig collateral custody, exactly. Multi-jurisdictional. Yeah. But my point in bringing that up is that both of those things are extremely sentiment-based. Mining, literally 1 week at Blockware, we will just crush it. And the next week, we'll be like, where did everybody go? And likewise, at the Bitcoin Advisor, when price is going up, people flock to us because they're realizing, oh, dang, I have 5 Bitcoin, and I had $500,000 of Bitcoin. Now I got 800 grand. Oh, wow, that's more than my mortgage. I should probably not have it all in a single sig in my bedroom, right? So, like, as price goes up, the attention just floods in to where we can't handle it. And then likewise, like the last 5 months at the time of recording, when Bitcoin's been flat, it's just painful. It's dead. We're like dragging teeth. We're telling people, like, hey, you said 3 months ago you really wanted to take this seriously for this reason, right? This is what we talked about. You said this is going to increase your peace of mind. This is good for you. But because the emotion is not there in the present moment, you're not taking the action and you're not preparing yourself for the green candles, right? So anyway, for me personally, I'm very grateful. I mean, again, I think this gets back to earlier what we were saying, the age thing. I think I was in the right spot at the right time. And it took me a couple of years. I was obsessed about Bitcoin price for multiple years, but now I don't really care about price. I have been checking it more while here at the conference because I'm curious if Donald Trump or Kennedy are going to pump it up. So at the time of recording, Kennedy spoke yesterday. Donald Trump's going to speak in a couple hours here. So we'll see. We'll see if it does pump. But typically, besides this conference, I don't check the price. But my point in rambling on about that is that I just when I feel like I graduated from not looking at price anymore, now I still have this pain of price and sentiment because these clients I know and come to be my friends. It's like unfortunately all humans, myself included, just don't get past the emotion until they've trained through it, right? But unfortunately, when it comes to taking advantage of opportunities in the mining marketplace
Yes.
and then getting your self-custody down. It's like, in both of the things, you kind of get one shot. With the mining, you get one shot a cycle, right? At one time a cycle, there's a really, really good opportunity. And then with the custody, it's one and done, right? If you lose it, it's gone, right? So,
Yeah.
this frustrating thing for me is that there'll be 5 months where price is flat and demand craters. But then, like, if price goes down 20% after the conference here, I'm going to get so many calls, right? Because people freak out. Oh, it's going down. What's happening? Look, the Bitcoin die. You know, how low are we going? And then if it goes up, people are going to reach out and be like, oh, my goodness, I should have gotten my XYZ problem solved 3 months ago. Because now, we're hitting new highs or whatever. And it's like, their time preference, it's so weird. Like, their time preference when price is flat, like subconsciously, we think, oh, I have months to do X or I have a year to do X.
Yep.
But then when it's going up, and I'm concerned when we hit all-time highs, it's just going to be, like, I mean, literally day to day. I mean, I'm curious what you would say. I've never been on this end of making content publicly on an all-time high mania of a bull market. Obviously, late February and early March of 2024, I felt like I got a small taste of it, and it freaked me out. But I'm curious. I mean, you've been doing this much longer than me. Like,
I think your sentiment is pretty universal for everyone in the Bitcoin space. That for better or worse, everything's tied to the Bitcoin price, at least at this stage, and it very, very much is a feast or famine situation, where when Bitcoin price is moving up, optimism just explodes. People are like, oh, this is happening. The dollar's collapsing. Everything's great. And people are investing.
Collapsing, everything's great.
I'm serious.
You're right. You're so right.
That sounds like such a Bitcoiner thing to say, but it's that type of sentiment, right? It's like,
this is it. Yeah. It's happening. It's the Ron Paul meme.
Yes,
it's happening.
Exactly. This is hyper Bitcoinization. And then when you go into a bear market, all of that optimism subsides. People there's fear. Basically, it's the amplified. What did Buffett say? Be fearful when others are greedy, greedy when others are fearful.
Right.
It's like an amplified version of that, and it's moving literally with like the intraday or intra-week Bitcoin price movements. And for us, like, we see it reflected in downloads, right? Bitcoin's in a bull market. People are downloading the shit out of our episodes, new ones, old ones, like everything's pumping. And then you go into a bear market, same quality of content, roughly, and downloads are just declining, right? Like the growth is not the same. So for better or worse, that's where we are today, that everything's tied to the Bitcoin price.
Right.
I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, actually, because, and this points to how important money is as a communication technology. Right. It's like, what is the price? The price is consumers revealing their preferences for the available supplies in the world, supplies of goods, services, knowledge, whatever it may be. Right. Well, people are expressing that preference, right, through price action. So when you see the price of Bitcoin moving up, it's like, well, people are more interested. And if people are mimetic, well, if some people are more interested, then other people are more interested. Right. And so it feeds back on itself until it gets to this frenzy point, right, where you probably get overwhelmed for maybe Bitcoin advisor services when Bitcoin price is pumping, and then when it's dumping, I don't know, maybe people are less interested. Like,
well, it's just a free market. I mean, Bitcoin advisor, we've been since 2016, we've been doing this for clients. Obviously, I've not been there since the beginning. I was the first American on the team, but I wasn't there 7 years ago in 2016. But I mean, basically, it's just supply and demand, right? When demand exceeds supply, price has to go up, right? Yeah. And so, for an extremely service-heavy business like us, I'm just very concerned that there are 400,000 ultra high net worth families, right? $30 million or more. It's
400,000.
Right, 400,000 more or less.
And that's what, above net worth of 30 million?
Yeah, 30 million, 20 million, something like that.
Worldwide, right?
Yeah, worldwide. Yeah, okay. Of course. Yeah. Right. Okay. But yeah. So whatever the specific number is, of course, someone's going to correct me in the comments and say I'm dumb for getting it wrong. But whatever the case, I believe it's 400,000 high net worth families over $30 million. 2,800 billionaires publicly that we know of. 70 million millionaires, maybe 60, 65 million, whatever it is. It's like, I mean, you're in this space along with me. The longer I'm in this space, the smaller it feels. Like it feels bigger in some ways because you're always meeting new people. So you never get to the end of it. But you see the same people again and again and again. And anyway, I've just come to the realization which is bittersweet for me personally, that the people that are qualified. Well, so let's take my where I make content, Blockware. I'm proud of the work I do there. I've had some really good in person podcasts. All the podcasts I've done there have been in person actually so far, which has been great. But when it comes to those things, it's just there's such an information gap, right? And people put it off, and then they want to cram a year's worth of education within 2 weeks, right? Or then likewise, and so they don't know what they're doing, right? And then likewise with Bitcoin Advisor, because that is very service based. Blockware, is much more education based. For something that's typically hard for people to understand, Bitcoin mining. But the Bitcoin Advisor, because it's so service oriented, it's like, I don't know. It's yet to be seen what the cycle is going to do. Obviously, who knows? Maybe Trump within 3 hours is going to say he wants to buy 1 million Bitcoin. I don't know. We'll see. The people watching will know what happened. But I don't know. I think it's part of just human emotion. I think most of the lawyers, most of the financial advisors, most of the money planners are putting it off. And not until something emotional happens are they going to start paying attention. Yeah. And I think Donald Trump, like it or not, has been that emotional hook for a lot of these people. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Again, I don't know if we were starting recording at that point, but I was saying to you, and I was thinking about it last night, just about how compared to last year, it just feels like there's so much more money here. Mm-hmm. It feels like there's so many more people with money here. Yeah. Many more high net worth people. You can just tell, right? Because I hate to be stereotypical, but people with a lot of money, they carry themselves in a certain way. They're not people wearing wizard hats. They're people that are, there
are some of those here.
They're people that, are put together, and they ask really good questions, and they want to shake your hand, and they have like very high quality questions. For me, I just have a vibe. That's not anything logical, but it's just my anecdotal experience. But anyway, my point in all this is that I think humans are emotional, even people that manage a lot of money, and they're not going to take action until something happens. For the retail people, maybe it's Bitcoin price. For these big experts, in this case, it seems to have been Trump, for better or worse.
Yeah, there is a herd mentality, right? And a small subset of people are willing to go against that herd mentality.
Right.
I actually think this is a common psychological trait among Bitcoiners, is that they tend to be disagreeable.
Yeah.
Because you have to be disagreeable to be like, what do you mean? Everyone in the world's chasing dollars.
Right.
If you're going to be one of the few guys that stands up and says, no, the dollar's a scam, you should actually buy Bitcoin.
Right.
You almost have to have disagreeableness built into you. Otherwise, you couldn't go against the crowd in that way without being disagreeable.
Have we talked about this before? Because I fully agree with that.
I don't know. I've probably repeated it 50 times. So.
well, I have too, but I don't recall you. I don't recall you saying that. But I fully agree with that because you've probably been asked this too. But I've been asked so many times, why don't more traditional finance people? Why don't more highly educated or highly ranking in degrees? More college. Why don't they understand Bitcoin? Why are there not as many women in Bitcoin, like by a factor of 10 or 8 or whatever? And that's always been my answer: is disagreeableness. Is that everyone has a personality matrix, right? Men are a bell curve on disagreeableness. Women are too. Men are slightly shifted towards more disagreeable. And because we are so early to Bitcoin, we're on the far end of that bell curve.
Exactly.
And just the vast majority are the most disagreeable demographic in the world.
Yes.
Middle-aged guys, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Middle-aged guys that typically, are like, blue collar, middle of the road people, right?
Yeah.
And that, to me, it's kind of poetic. That's what we see, which then also, to me, getting back to what I was saying before about, the vertical green candles and just mass adoption, is that it's like, it's like a forest fire. And we're burning through all the disagreeable people, right? It took me years to learn about Bitcoin. It took years to learn about Bitcoin, right? Michael Saylor from 2013 to 2020 didn't figure it out. Eric Weiss, I loved hanging out with Eric in Prague last month because he has so many stories about he was sitting down with Saylor, trying to orange pill him, just showing, not pushing it, but just and Michael's disagreeable, as we all know he is, and but he figured it out because his intellectual curiosity and need, right, the people that need to know, surpassed that. So anyway, my point is, I really wonder with Bitcoin adoption, at some point, we're going to burn through this tiny, tiny percentage of extremely disagreeable people. And then the next wave are going to be more agreeable people, right?
Yeah.
Like for me, it might take me 1,000 hours to finally be convinced with Bitcoin. But, someone a couple of years from now, like because their personality is more agreeable, because Bitcoin's already, $2.5 million, because financial advisor is pro, I'll buy it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily subscribe to the we're going to have hyper Bitcoinization within 5 years mentality. I think is going to take a very long time. But if I were to subscribe to that, I would say that that's a really strong, compelling case, is that we just burn through the disagreeable 2% of the population. The only people that are left are the people that are agreeable. Not that agreeableness is bad, it's just different. And I mean, to me, that would be the most compelling argument, that we just hyper Bitcoinize. But
yeah, then you end up with you get that obstinate minority of disagreeable Bitcoiners that are hodl forever, right?
Right.
You see their purchasing power going up, their net worth increasing as Bitcoin is monetizing. The more agreeable people, I would say, are going to tend to be more imitative, right? They're going to be further along that impressionable. They're going to be more impressionable than impressioning, if that's a word,
right,
curve. So they're likely to imitate those people that are having successful financial strategies by saving in Bitcoin. And so you're likely to get larger cohorts of people coming into Bitcoin, in addition to things like the Lindy effect, right? The longer Bitcoin is around, the more it's considered to just be a permanent feature of our lives. In addition to the pain, right? Another thing that was really motivational for Saylor is like, okay, Eric Wise was knocking on that door for 5 years or whatever
but it was his company.
But it was the pain of post-pandemic world that actually triggers the epiphany. Like, oh, wait a minute, I'm sitting on a burning pile of cash. I need to move this. Other people are going to need to go through that pain as well. In Bitcoin, we often dream about the idea of forming citadels, which are independent, self-sovereign communities that have their own energy, food, and water resources. Today, that dream is becoming a reality at the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a 705-acre regenerative agriculture community located at the Florida-Georgia line near Folkston, Georgia. The farm is known as the healthiest place on earth, and it includes orchards, organic standing gardens, regenerative animal pastures, berry fields, and much, much more. Today, the farm features 25 custom-built cabins and has plans to construct 225 more in the years ahead. The farm has its own food, energy, and water sources and is completely off-grid. So if you're looking to join a Citadel community comprised of sovereign individuals, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about membership. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on custom cabin pricing. Again, that's okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE.
You've heard his MIT story, right?
I'm not sure.
Going to the class. So it's online. Look it up. Michael Saylor tells it better than me, but this is like exactly the point we're talking about. Michael Saylor, he told me this. But we had dinner last month. He told me this at dinner. Then he said it online too. He said it publicly. But the story is, this is like, I think maybe 8 months ago, a year ago. He MIT grad, obviously, right? So he went back to MIT, no, Harvard. It was Harvard. Sorry, it was Harvard Business School. Went back to Harvard Business School. A room. I think he is like 20, 30 students or whatever. he gives them a pitch, and it's a Saylor pitch, so it's very long, right? He gives them an explanation. The company was going to die. We're going to lose billions. It was going to be over in T minus X months. And then we did the Bitcoin strategy. The stock's up, 3,000%, whatever. And now, whatever, right? We've benefited shareholder value, right? And then the professor, he finishes his little speech, goes to all the students, asks them one by one, would they do Saylor strategy? And, Michael says that they all said no. That it's too risky. It's too whatever. It's not traditional. And so I think that gets to the exact point that I'm not making fun of people in college, but I am saying that those, the Michael Saylor on the screen, the extremely disagreeable person that took the leap when nobody else did, went 140% all in, extremely leveraged. He's the disagreeable one, just like obvious, like you idiots, right? And then you have all the people that are sitting in Harvard Business School, the best business school in the world, and they've gone through the tests, they've gone through what's the curriculum, and it's not that tests and curriculums are bad. It's just that it's like it's probably attract those extremely extended school programs probably attract the most agreeable people, and then it probably continues to retrain their mind, be even more agreeable.
Right. Because the disagreeable ones drop out of college and start companies.
Like me, I dropped out of college.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And then if you kind of zoom out on the whole human organism, it's like, well, it makes sense that the majority of people would be conservative, herd-like following, right?
Right.
There's safety in numbers, right?
Right, it's safe.
You really just want the renegades and the pioneers at the edges, right? Kind of exploring new territory, failing 9 times out of 10 or more. But occasionally someone figures something out that's a really big deal, and then the rest of the herd will slowly emulate that once they figured out it's safe and whatnot. So we're and Saylor's put it to me is like, because we've had these conversations for hours and hours, I'm like, how the idea of Bitcoin is not that complicated. Like, of course, Bitcoin's very complicated. It's an infinite rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, money printing is theft. No one wants to hold money someone else can print. Bitcoin is money no one else can print. Like, obviously you fucking hold some of it.
Right.
How does that idea how's it not spread more quickly? And he was saying, well, there's only a certain speed with which a profound idea can propagate through the minds of men. And so it's something that's like outside the Overton window, and I guess the herd is still opening its mind, if I could use that term, to digest that idea into the Overton window. And I think it just takes time.
Right.
So.
I don't know if you want to get into current events, I guess, but I think that's why yesterday's Kennedy event, to me, I was shocked. I don't know what you. I mean, you've spent more time with. I've never met Kennedy. You've met him a few times, right? So maybe you weren't as shocked as I was, but I was completely shocked in his presentation. You were talking about the Overton window. I think, again, I'm not pandering to Trump or Kennedy, right? My criticisms of both, but I think that. I really got to credit them and respect them for like shifting the narrative so wildly into left field. It's so wildly down the line because I think us Bitcoiners get kind of lost in just the news, right? Kind of like how you have, if you see 10 headlines talking about some company buying $5 million of Bitcoin, that has a similar emotional, or that has a disproportionate ratio of brain energy and attention given to it compared to Kennedy, who's literally outlining a plan if he's elected, which obviously most people don't think he would be, but if he was, we're talking literally thousands of times more money, right? Maybe Kennedy's speech might, in most Bitcoiners, be a 10x bigger deal in their emotion, even though it's actually in numerical terms like literally 10,000 or 100,000 times a bigger deal. So anyway, I really gotta credit them for.
Can you hit the bullet point, the highlights of his speech? He said he's going to order the
Kennedy?
Treasury to buy so much Bitcoin per day to hit 4 million Bitcoin balance.
Well, and he said that within the first minute of him being on stage. I was in the very back of the auditorium because there's no way I'm waiting 2 hours in line to get in the building. So I got there like just minutes before Edward Snowden just finished up his talk, and so Kennedy comes out. I'm like, okay, we're gonna probably have 30 minutes of chit chat, oh, Bitcoin, great, free, like very generic stuff. And then at the end, he's going to announce one big announcement. But then boom, within 60 seconds, he's like, yes, I have studied Bitcoin hard. I want America to buy 550 day to hit 4 million. I'm like, whoa, what? I was completely shocked. Then he gave another like half dozen announcements or so. Then he talked for an hour.
4 million Bitcoin.
Right. 4 million Bitcoin.
So close to 20% of the supply.
Right. 19%.
Wow.
Right.
Staggering.
Yeah. I mean, the first thought in my mind, was, I was speechless because that's not, it's kind of embarrassing to say it actually on camera, but it's not something I considered. Like it didn't even cross my mind that he would say a number over 500,000. Like it was a number so much bigger. Now, of course, there are criticisms. Criticism number one is that his odds of being elected are lower than, the Democratic or Republican nominees. Okay, fine, whatever. I don't think it matters. I think the Overton window is the really big deal here in particular, no matter which candidate's saying it. Because, Trump could say bullish stuff, Kennedy could say bullish stuff, then they could retract their promises, right? Ultimately, these are promises, and the power of the chair might change their heart or change their tune once they get into office, right? So, I think the Overton window is the bigger deal because if the presidential candidate says it, well, then what prevents a presidential candidate of somewhere else in the world copying it, right? So anyway, in regards to the 4 million, that was the thing that was shocking to me, just because it was a number so much larger than I expected. And then, after I kind of regained my thoughts for a moment, I thought it's like the math does not add up. There's 1.7 million Bitcoin left on exchanges, and I'm like, okay, where is the other? Like, that's not even half of the 4 million. And that's not even, that's all of them. That's more than all the daily issuance forever in the rest of Bitcoin's history, the next century. That is more than double all the Bitcoin exchanges. And that's forgetting all the other Michael Saylors, the other 20. This is the thing people have to keep in mind. There are 800 billionaires with more money than Michael Saylor today, right? And Michael Saylor's had a significant net worth increase because of Bitcoin, obviously, right? And so, at the time, I don't know how many there were, but maybe 1,000. Like, there are hundreds of billionaires that have a higher net worth than Saylor personally, and also most of them, of course, have access to much larger companies than Saylor does, right? So, forget Michael Saylor, forget the 400,000, 500,000 ultra high net worth families with 30 million. And again, this is where the numbers kind of get messed up. So I'm from Michigan, and I'm proud to say that as of yesterday morning, Michigan, the SEC had a filing. It released that Michigan has bought $7 million worth of Bitcoin for our state pension, whatever, right? Which is basically nothing. It's not even 70. It's barely 70 cents for all the citizens of Michigan. But my point is that, us Bitcoiners get bullish about, oh, wow, Wisconsin bought, 100 million. Oh, wow, Michigan bought 7 million. That's great, right? But there's 400,000 families with, 20, 30, 50, 80 million. It's like, we can be excited about these cute little tiny 0.1 allocations from these pension funds. And they are a big deal because they're getting off zero. But it's like, okay, sure, Michigan's cool. They bought 7 million, but like multiply that by 400,000x, like all those families, that's like a 30% allocation for them, right? Yeah. So, I'm kind of going on a bunch of different tangents here, but it's like you have hundreds of billionaires richer than Saylor. You have another, 1,000 or 1,500 more billionaires that don't have as much money as Saylor. All of them are going to be chasing Bitcoin. Then you have all the high net worth individuals. Then you have the 70 million millionaires. Then you have, the what we would call the plebs, right, in Bitcoin, the average middle class, blue collar worker in America. But then, the thing I personally care about the most, then you have the other, 6 billion people that we tend to forget when we talk about these numbers, right? And this is really the bullish thing about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is useless in the long-term future if there's no humanity to price in it, right? The only bearish case for Bitcoin in the long term is if humanity is bearish, right? Or human productivity and progress, right? And so to me, it's not just about, oh, wow, Bitcoin's going to be number go up because we're going to absorb all of the current wealth from these rich people, but it's to realize, wait, the minority of the planet is rich.
Yes. Right.
And Bitcoin's promise or Bitcoin's vision is that the majority of the planet becomes rich. Yeah. And so all of that context to say Kennedy wants to buy 4 million, okay, right. Good luck. Really. I don't know if it's possible technically. It's either impossible or they have to force price up vertically.
Well, of course, yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
basically everything you mentioned, I think, would be sufficient to trigger a hyper Bitcoinization type event, right? You're literally, if he were to try and acquire 4 million Bitcoin,
right?
Everyone you just mentioned, it's going to put them in, give them a greater motivation to also participate in that acquisition spree of Bitcoin. Right. The one thing you didn't mention, I would add, that's very important is every other nation state in the world that's going to say, the global superpower has now adopted this Bitcoin strategy. Maybe we should think about acquiring some of that so we're not left at a disadvantage.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you get the entire, you basically just described everyone in the world, right?
Right.
All the millionaires, all the billionaires, all the plebs, all the nation states, all the capital in the world fighting over 4 million Bitcoin that's already not there. Like, what else could that be other than just this feeding frenzy and runaway price appreciation?
Precisely. Yeah. So, so I didn't sleep last night. Like, I've just been up all night because
Bitcoin will do that to you sometimes.
I know. It's not healthy. It's not good. I'm not advocating. I'm not happy about that.
You're in your 20s. You can do it for now.
Well, I know. Like, it's a time. It's a season. Like, I am in a time in my life where I'm basically obsessed about Bitcoin because of. Well, as a side note, the way I look at it is that if I was born 100 years ago, I would have spent 15 hours a day or 24 hours a day, in a trench in some war, covered in, blood and maggots eating my foot or whatever, like the least I can do is be obsessed about Bitcoin and hopefully tilt the needle in a very, very tiny direction towards a better future. So, that's a side note. Like, I don't care. Like, when I come to these conferences, I get like super, like just adrenaline, like just pushes through me. So anyway, I was up all night and I'm going to have to be up all day. Today's a pretty big day. Especially depending on what Trump says. But the point saying is I was thinking literally all night, about this because it took me by surprise. And this is something that Jeff Booth talks about. That I really like his mental model. You've probably heard Jeff talk about this, but if you are consistently surprised, then probably something's wrong with your worldview, right? And so, I frankly, I'm not often surprised in Bitcoin anymore at this point. I used to be when I knew very little, but now that I know a little bit more, I'm surprised less. I was surprised by Ethereum ETF being approved. I was surprised that we hit an all-time high before the halving. That really surprised me. But the Kennedy thing really, really shocked me. And so I forget where I was going with that. But the point in all that I think I was trying to get to was just at the end of the day, I was thinking about it, many different aspects of it last night. And the thing that I think was really, to me, interesting was not just that Kennedy wanted to buy the 4 million Bitcoin, but the way at which he proposed it. He proposed 550 Bitcoin a day for basically almost exactly 20 years to get to the 4 million. And I thought, that actually makes a lot of sense. That seems a lot more ethical than saying 4 million within 6 weeks or 4 million all at once, right? Because it seems like it's an intentional way to give everyone else in the world as much runway as possible to transition to where, if Kennedy went out and said, we're going to smash by 4 million Bitcoin day one,
that's not
that transition would be extremely chaotic. And so it was interesting to me. He said 550 Bitcoin and not a fiat number. That was the first thing that really struck me because I think that's a really important distinction. And then that second thing was that he was trying to spread it out over time. Now, I do think there's a legitimate question of can any nation state transition its fiat energy to Bitcoin ethically? Because fiat is not ethical. So I do think that's a legitimate question. But that question aside, I thought it was interesting. Kennedy seemed to be that he understood Bitcoin enough to do what I would argue that both of those things were right. That he was focused on stacking Bitcoin unit of account a day, not fiat unit of account, and that he was trying to give other people a chance, Americans a chance to also stack. Basically say, America's going to start buying Bitcoin. Hint, hint, you should probably buy some Bitcoin in case it catches on. And then, the concern, though, is that not all countries are that equitable, again, which I say in air quotes. Xi Jinping is probably not going to do that. If Xi Jinping or the CCP wanted to buy 4 million Bitcoin, they're not going to announce it to, their 1.5 whatever billion Chinese and say, we're going to buy 550 Bitcoin a day for the next 20 years. No, they're going to say, we're going to do it right now in the next, 6 weeks. We'll just print it, right? And so anyway, I think it's really interesting that we're at this point where these politicians are kind of talking about different ways to go. And I don't know. I think it's a lot more nuanced and complicated than just nation state print money, buy Bitcoin. I mean, at the end of the day, it is that simple, but it's also all these nuances of how do they do it where they protect their own self-interest as a politician, where they can get reelected. Because then the question is, well, let's say Kennedy were to be elected, smash buy 550 the next 4 years, then the next candidate were to come in and say, oh, I'll buy 600 a day, so I'll pump your bags more, right? Like, and what, like, you know, it's part of the, it's just so many questions that it's like, I guess now we have to ask. And each one has its own trade-offs, and ultimately, I want the one with the trade-offs that have the lowest probability of, you know, conflict. Soft war turning into hard war.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So the smoother the transition, the better it is for everyone involved.
Well, the accelerationists in Bitcoin would not agree, right?
I don't know. It seems like, I don't know. It just seems like the slower, I don't want to say, I don't know. There's some sweet spot in the middle. If it's like a million years, obviously that's too slow. If it's 1 year, that's too fast.
Yeah.
Who knows where the sweet spot is, but.
I mean, I look at you and you clearly work out, right? And it's like.
Never.
Yes. You know, I mean, like if you were like me and, you know, you didn't have all the muscles and it's like, you just, if you gave me two cars
right.
to, you know, curl 2 cars, it's like, that's going to be much worse
it's like
than
trying to cram, like.
Right.
The masters, like I used to be able to cram for tests mostly and like get by in school.
Right.
Until I got to graduate school for accounting, which is really fucking hard. Like you actually can't cram for tests. You need to study every day consistently to learn the language of business that is accounting. That like trying to cram for a master's of accounting test is like trying to smash by 4 million Bitcoin. Like it's just not gonna, things are gonna break basically. It's not gonna work. But 550 a day over a long period of time is that kind of gradual method that actually works and lets you absorb it in a way that's functional.
Right.
This September 5th through 9th, 2024, join me on the Pacific coast of Mexico for our first ever men's retreat, which we are calling The Art of Alpha. In a cooperative training environment at a world-class retreat center, we will be having daily meditations, movement practices, yoga, cold plunging, infrared sauna, lymphatic drainage, massage, heart rate variability training, gut health lectures, all while enjoying an anti-inflammatory diet, free of allergens and designed for optimal full body health. The retreat center is a gorgeous biohacker's paradise located right on the ocean. You can think of this place as a nervous system reset facility. At the Art of Alpha, we are seeking men who wish to cultivate freedom, wisdom, sovereignty, physical fitness, truth, and love in themselves and in those who look up to them. If you've always felt motivated to push yourself to new limits, to discover the best version of yourself, but you've struggled to find the right community to immerse yourself in, then the Art of Alpha is for you. You will be training alongside a group of men who have been individually selected for their outstanding self-discipline, virtue, and work ethic. To apply to join the first ever Art of Alpha event, go to breedloveevents.com. And yes, I did say you will have to apply as we're striving to gather a select group of men for this experience. Again, that's breedloveevents.com to apply to join us for the Art of Alpha on the Pacific coast of Mexico, September 5th through 9th, 2024. I'd like to thank my friends at Swan Bitcoin for their long-standing support of the What is Money show. Swan's mission is to help millions of people get into Bitcoin, so they built the best solution to set up recurring Bitcoin buys and automatic withdrawals into cold storage. With the Swan app, it takes just 2 minutes to sign up and start buying Bitcoin. If you're a new customer, you get $10 in free Bitcoin for signing up, and the first $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy incurs 0 fees. If you're an existing Swan customer, then the next $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy now incurs 0 fees. So if you love to recommend Bitcoin to friends and family, then Swan is the best place to start. So go to swanbitcoin.com/breedlove to get started today. Again, that's swanbitcoin.com/breedlove. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, though, that like the dream of Bitcoin, we're so hyper-focused on, you know, the billionaires, the millionaires, and then everyone else.
Right.
And we're saying like, oh, we have almost this zero-sum mentality about wealth. That
Right.
There's just a little bit of it. A
Right.
few people have most of it, and most people have none of it.
Right.
But one of the great promises of Bitcoin is that by actually making things like inflation impossible, which is theft,
Right.
and then making taxation at least on a fairer footing, let's say. Like if you're being overtaxed, it's much easier for you to leave the jurisdiction that's overtaxing you with your capital, right? You're not going to be as subjected to capital controls or other coercive measures. So people get this power to vote with their feet that we've never had before, with our capital intact. Typically, you just have to flee the country with whatever's on your back. But now you could flee the country with, a lot of purchasing power on your brain. In that world, presumably, we have less to no inflation and we have less taxation. So we have less theft occurring. And so by economic axiom, if you have less theft occurring, every second that's spent stealing from someone is a second that's spent not producing something.
Right.
So when you have less theft occurring, you have more production, the possibility of more production occurring. So
Right.
humanity becomes more productive, which is to say we become more wealthy in aggregate. And so Bitcoin not only it's letting the individuals hold the fruits of their own labor,
Right.
but it's also creating an incentive structure that encourages the production of more aggregate wealth, right? The proverbial tide that rises all ships,
Right.
Raises all ships. That's not something I think people take seriously enough. It's maybe obviously it's kind of a mouthful to even say it, but Bitcoin doesn't just emerge and redistribute the existing wealth more equitably.
Right.
It's also stimulating more wealth creation. So everyone will become richer as a result of this thing.
I think that is.
Sorry, last one.
Go for it.
You are sort of known for saying you are not too late to Bitcoin, right? Like you're constantly telling people that think they're too late to Bitcoin, which many people do. Oh, I heard about it when it's 1,000, now it's 70,000. I can't touch it.
Yeah.
But you are often making arguments to the contrary. What is that argument based on? Like, how do you present that to people? Is that part of the argument that, not only do you get to keep your wealth, but it's also going to create a world that generates more aggregate wealth? How do you communicate to people that they are indeed not too late to Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really, this is the funny thing. It ties into so many things you already talked about, but it's all emotion. You and me, we're in Bitcoin because of emotion. Mm. People are anti-Bitcoin, they're anti-Bitcoin because of emotion, right? We use logic, we use morals, we use ethics, all that, but ultimately, as the Bible says, right, nothing is more deceitful than our own hearts, right? Mm-hmm. Not even we know in our own hearts, right? Like really, if we're really honest, if everyone watching this is really honest, it's all emotion, right? And all the FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt around Bitcoin, has emotion behind it too. But I believe the single greatest emotional hurdle, the single greatest piece of FUD, let's say, against Bitcoin is that precise argument that you're not too late to Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Because if people thought that they were not too late to Bitcoin, then they would look past all the other arguments. They look past the climate argument. Mm-hmm. They look past the money laundering argument. They look past all these other...
They just want to know they can still get rich, basically.
Right, right. They wouldn't care. They would find an excuse, right? Sure. We know this because we see this with the stupid digital tokens that are worth nothing, that we all know are worth nothing. Right. People will emotionally justify anything if they think that there was a profit in it for them that they have some probability of getting, right? So I actually believe, and this is a common critique I have online, or that people have given me online, is that, Luke, you're a Christian and you talk about the humanitarian case for Bitcoin, and you say you don't check price, but all of your thumbnails and all of your titles and all your articles have price in them. Like, yes, and I mean, to me, it's very intentional. Frankly, I don't like that, and that gets back to the whole social media discussion that we were starting at the very beginning of this conversation, but I do it for a reason. The reason is because I want to be effective. I want to propagate the message as much as I possibly can, and I'm willing to tolerate a hook of, let's say, Skittles to reel them in and bring them to the ribeye, right? I'm willing to do that, right? And so, to your question of too late to Bitcoin, that's the context I want to give beforehand. That I think if people watching this can internalize that they are not too late to Bitcoin, emotionally internalize that, I'm telling you, you are not too late to Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was cheaper. Yes, it was much cheaper at one point, but you're still not too late, right? If people can internalize that, then all these other questions they have, criticisms, benefits, whatever of Bitcoin, you will find the incentive.
They will rationalize.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they'll rationalize it, and they will find the emotion within themselves to then do the work and verify that what they're saying is true. Because ultimately, yes, we make decisions based on emotion, but we want to verify reality to the best of our ability, right? And so if people make that emotional shift and they internalize and actually believe that they are not too late, they will make better decisions. So
is part of this just overcoming unit bias too?
Unit bias, anchoring bias, all of them, right?
Because people just think, again, thinking through dollars, right? They're like, oh, it's a 5-digit number now. That's just too expensive.
Right.
Whereas we all know unit bias is total bullshit, right? You could price the thing, you could look at price per sat instead, and you get a totally different number that, I don't know, is sub 1 cent. So we'll just load up.
Right.
Is that the trick? It's like getting people, because I found that one to be actually kind of difficult. When you start to tell people, hey, you think in terms of dollars, you're looking at the world through a certain lens, and you can take off that pair of glasses and put on a different one, people are like, that metacognitive leap seems to be like a lot for some people, but it is also necessary to overcome this unit bias and perhaps contribute to their understanding that they're not late.
Well, it's a bit of a controversial thing in Bitcoin too, because I'm not comparing myself to Michael Saylor in this regard, but Michael Saylor, I think, is the best at this. People all the time say, oh, Michael Saylor doesn't understand Bitcoin because he talks about Bitcoin in terms of fiat. He prices it in terms of CAGRs. He prices it in terms of USD, right? Michael Saylor doesn't understand Bitcoin, right? And it's like, respectfully, like if you've interacted with them, if you've watched them for 1,000 hours, if you really think about who he's pitching, it's like, in my opinion, I think Michael understands Bitcoin. I think he understands it's not just NASA, but it's also a currency. I think he understands all these things. I think he understands that fiat eventually at some point is going away. I mean, come on. Literally yesterday, all right, which I guess for me still feels like today, but he's literally talking about Bitcoin for the next 100,000 years, right? Does Michael Saylor really think that the US dollar is going to be around for 100,000 years? I don't think so. So my point is that in a similar way, Michael Saylor is leveraging traditional finance speak to be the hook, to bring people in, to help them understand it, internalize it. Right. I think that is the number one way at which we increase adoption. And so it's
good marketing.
Right. And so in the same way I copy Michael Saylor and I buy Bitcoin, I'm copying him in that strategy. And frankly, it works because people do click for the price. They want to know if it's going up or down. Obviously,
Why is there even the sense that, I don't know, you said maybe some people in your audience are guilt tripping you about talking about price. Why should there be any guilt associated with talking about the price of anything? I mean, I feel like there's this hangover maybe of the Christian notion, right? That the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, that people start to think that if you price anything or talk about things in commercial terms, that somehow you're flirting with evil. There's nothing evil at all about commercial exchange. It's literally how we build the world.
Right.
Why do you feel the need to justify this? Is it just because of this feedback you're getting from your audience, or like, what is it?
Well, I mean, frankly, I don't necessarily feel the need to justify. Maybe I am justifying it, but I mean, frankly, I don't care what people online say about me. I mean, I do care in that I want to make sure that I'm communicating myself properly so that they don't think I'm saying something I'm not. But if I know that I've done a decent job at communicating something and they are like, oh, you're blah, 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 I'm like, okay, whatever. Yeah. Because I don't care. I mean, people will dislike me for whatever reason, and, that's fine. I mean, whatever. It comes with the territory, right? You can't be early and be popular. You can't say something compelling and something with truth and then, get attacked by the people that are lying, right? So I don't really care, but I think what you're touching on actually is a really good point. I think it's a slightly separate point, but, about theology, and that's a rabbit hole too. But I think the greatest problem with the American church in particular, maybe we say the Western church, is the last, let's say, 50 years, couple generations, is that the Christian church decided to separate church from everything else, right? Instead of having your work be holy, your rest be holy, your family time be holy, your household be holy, then it kind of just separated to where church is holy, you dress up nice, whatever. The rest of the week, you do whatever, right? And I think that was a big problem, and I do think fiat contributed to that. I don't think it was the only factor to it, but I think fiat escalated and incentivized that, right? And so, like today, there are many, many people either that are Christians that are not properly understanding the gospel, or just as common, if not more common, people that are not Christians that think that's what all Christians believe, right? What I'm referring to is this idea that that thing is inherently good or bad, right? But Jesus actually talks very little about is that thing good or bad. He talks much more about your intent behind that thing, your heart behind that thing, right? God cares much less about if you're drinking alcohol, and he cares much more about are you getting drunk drinking the alcohol, right? I was actually a couple people over the last couple of days in different conversations here in Bitcoin land. Again, this is part of the reason why I get so obsessed and I, can't sleep, can't eat, and just time flies by these things is because Jesus' name comes up more at these Bitcoin conferences than in other circles, which that's fine, to each their own. But anyway, it's not that whiskey's good and wine is bad. It's that Jesus cares about, God cares about, like, what are you using it for, right? Yeah. Are you using it to get drunk, right? And the same thing with money, right? And then I'm coming back to your point about the love of money, right? Most people look at the love of money and in the biblical sense, and they're like, well, if you love money, that means if you're rich or you want to get rich or whatever, that's the root of all evil, right? From rapists to idolatry to everything else, right? That's the root of all evil. But that's actually not what the Bible says, right? I mean, if you look at translations and you look at, what is actually being said there, the love of all money is the love of earthly things, because money is the one thing that we use to exchange for anything else in the world, right? And so the love of money, it's not money, it's the love of the things at which money can acquire, the things of this world, right? Which can also mean good things, okay? The love of money is the love of anything in this world. The love of more status and ego. I got more dollars than you. I got more Bitcoin than you. I'm better than you, right? That is the love of money. That's idolatry. That's pride. That's that's sinful. Also good things, right? It's like I love I love my wife more than life itself, right? I love my wife more than God, right? Like God would have a problem with that, right? God is a jealous God, right? That's what the Bible says, right? So that would be, anything of this world is that desire, right? And ultimately, if we go back to the very beginning of the problem, right? Because the root problem of the world is not the state. The root problem of the world is sin. Ultimately, if we go back and back and back, even Adam and Eve, that also, in a different sense, is the love of money. Because what was the fall? It was Adam subverting God's order, right? God says, God is, I am everything that is good, beautiful, and true. I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? I'm the bread of life. And Adam and Eve, said, no, we're going to reject your rules, and we're going to do our rules, right? And that's something that people outside, the Bible, have trouble understanding, is that what does a fruit have to do with anything, right? Like, what does it make sense? And like, of course, there's many, other passages in the Bible that, don't make sense, but it's not about the fruit. It's about, there was a rule with that fruit, the knowledge of good and evil, right? And humans decided to partake in it, right? Humans had the opportunity to do that, right? And this is, I think I've heard you say this before, but it's very true, is that you can't be good without also having a capability to be dangerous, right? You have to have the option, you have to have the capacity, right? It's like, if I don't have the ability to shoot you and I don't shoot you, that doesn't mean that I'm morally good, right? Right? And so, if I do have the option and I choose not to, right? This is being meek, right? Many people have heard this before. Being meek is not being weak. Being meek is sheathing your sword, right?
Yeah, knowing how to use your weapon but choosing to keep it sheathed.
Right, precisely. So anyway, my point there is that what is the love of money? The love of money is pride. And what is pride? Pride is the subversion of God's authority in favor for your own authority. God is, a good teacher and a helper, but at the end of the day, I make the choices about my life. I'm a good person. I have done the work to be worthy of justification. Jesus is not the one that did the work for me. I'm the one that did it. So in my view, and this is a lot of different rabbit holes I'm going on, but to your point, all these rabbit holes, I guess we're going back from the clickbait discussion. But I think you bring up a really good point about how in this modern world, I think fiat and wealth inequality from fiat incentives kind of perverts this more, right? Because as we have fiat incentives that are distorting wealth in favor of asset holders at the expense of currency savers, what that's doing is that it's giving this wealth inequitably, right? People like, let's say Elon Musk, an example, meritocracy, right? Those people, they're building stuff. Most people don't have a problem with them. They have a problem with the leeches. They have a problem with the parasites, right? And so then that increases the mental, emotional, right? Every argument's an emotion. It increases the emotional connection we have to having money, evil, And then ultimately we kind of subconsciously pervert this common phrase that, yes, is a Christian phrase and a deep theological rabbit hole that I could keep going down, I guess. But also, the love of money is all evil. It's just a common cliche. It's something we all say, right? And the more we say it and the more we get involved, the more our own emotional understanding of it gets perverted by a church that's not correcting that and a fiat monetary incentive that's increasing this emotional connection to this false truth people have. And then that's just where you get all these distortions. So anyway, at the end of the day, I do want to get rich. I think you want to. I think everybody wants to get rich. But to me, it's not about the thing. It's not about the fruit. It's not about the wine versus the whiskey. Why do I go and get rich? Do I want to get rich because I want to retire and I want to, be lazy and cruise the world and, just, stimulate my mind and my body for the rest of my life, right? Is that what I want? Or do I want to get rich not because it's my identity, not because it's what I must do, but because God is my master, I am a slave, right? I'm a slave to Jesus Christ, and I'm going to do what he wants me to do, right? And then that gets the free will discussion. But it's like, you're slaves to sin, but then when you see something that is beautiful, yes, it's freedom, quote unquote, but at the same time, you don't really have a choice, right? Like, this is the funny thing to me, is that you're a slave to fiat currency. You're a slave. You don't have a choice, right? There is a nation state that's the most powerful human organization in the world that will point a gun at you and throw you into jail if you don't give us these tokens we print out of thin air. You're a slave to fiat. But then you find Bitcoin. And once you find Bitcoin, you understand Bitcoin, you start working for Bitcoin. You start caring about Bitcoin. Like myself, you start thinking about Bitcoin. You literally forget to eat. You stay up literally all night. You can't stop thinking about this person. I can't stop having conversations with people. I can't stop making these podcasts. I can't stop talking to people, taking photos with people, signing stuff, reading books, reading articles, watching podcasts, listening. It's like I work for Bitcoin way more than I ever worked for fiat, right? And so, yes, I'm free in pursuing and serving this good thing that's Bitcoin, but ultimately, I'm still kind of a slave to it, right? Because when you see and internalize something that's good, beautiful, and true, you can't help but being drawn to it. And so, anyway, to me, in the same way, it's the same thing with Jesus, right? I am free, and my yoke is light with him, right? But at the same time, I'm a slave, right? And that's kind of the nuance there. It's kind of the beautiful, crazy irony with it, is that I'm a slave, right? Every second of my life, I'm serving him. And this is the problem that the church had in the 20th century.
But it's opt-in.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You opted in, so it's like.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt. There's the paradox of freedom. That there's a book, The Role of the Individual in History, and he talks about that very thing. It's like freedom is this phenomenon where you accumulate all these options and paths and choice. You have all these options you've created for yourself, but at some point, you reach a point in your freedom journey where you find the one option that you can't not do. Right. So then all of a sudden, all of that option set collapses. You found your passion or your purpose or your path in life, whatever you want to call it, and then you become enslaved to that. But it was an opt-in, right? There was no gun to the head. There was no coercion. It was you freely exploring your talents and the world and finding a fit between the two, and then you found the thing that you just must do. Yep. And for a lot of people, it seems like Bitcoin provides that. Right.
That's such a. I mean, I've not heard that book. I'd like to look it up and maybe read it later. But I think that's such an interesting conversation that, just like Bitcoin, you could go down that rabbit hole endlessly. The Bible, kind of like Bitcoin, is that a lot of people don't care about it, they don't get it, whatever. But then it's like kind of when you get the hook and you like, oh, what is this? It's like Bitcoin. It's very simple, but it's also not so simple, right? Yeah. And so even your point about freedom and opt-in freedom, it's like, yes, it's opt-in. Yes, it's opt-in. And at the same time, though, it's like, can a fiat currency that's corrupt, unethical, and fraudulent ever become Bitcoin? Can it ever become, on its own desire and volition,
no, because
something that's perfect?
It doesn't have... I should also say opt-in / opt-out, right? That's the freedom component. You can be in or out. Well, you can't be out of fiat, frankly, because there is the gun to your head that says you have to pay your taxes in it. right? So there's no opt out to fiat. So I don't think it can ever be an ethical equivalent.
Yeah.
To
Well,
Bitcoin.
yeah. And I'm saying maybe literally it's opt in, opt out with Bitcoin. But my point is, I'm using Bitcoin and fiat as a metaphor for, let's say, light and darkness. Let's say, Jesus, which is what I believe. But it's like, yes, Jesus is opt in, opt out. You could say that. But at the end of the day, if Jesus grabs that, like for me, that I have the conviction of grabs your heart, like, okay, yeah, Jesus is opt out, but not for me. Like, I'm not leaving. And the same with many Bitcoiners will relate. It's like, yeah, you could opt out of Bitcoin back to fiat, sure.
Yeah.
But are you going to do it?
Exactly.
No. You're a slave to Bitcoin. Yes, you're free, but like you've seen something so beautiful and captivating that's getting you obsessed and where you care about it. You can't help but desire it more.
That event horizon and the paradox of freedom. It's like you found the thing that you can't not do, right? Which is Bitcoin or Christ for you. The other things that come up for me there as you're describing that is, obviously, there's many things money can't buy, right?
For sure.
Fit body, sound mind, good relationships, household full of love.
Right.
There's certain things money absolutely just can't buy.
Right.
And those seem to be the domains that require love, right? They actually require love. You want to have good relationships, well, you better love someone and let them love you back and have this reciprocal opening. You want to take care of yourself, well, you have to have self-love, right? You have to plan, you have to eat right and do whatever. Whereas you said the love of money would be like the love of worldly things, right? Things that can be acquired just in commercial exchange.
The love of anything over God, right?
Yeah, so it's a misapplication of love. It's like if you're loving worldly things, you're not loving to the extent you should be, perhaps these other domains, right? That money cannot buy.
Right.
So I think there's like a game theory element here too, where fiat currency, it's devolving human relations into more of a zero-sum thing, because it's like, for me to advance my material interests of worldly things, it now comes at the expense of someone else's livelihood, frankly. Right. So you're encroaching on their ability to have fit body, sound mind, good relationships, spend time with their family, right? Fiat currency is time theft, right? You're extracting from someone, whoever the saver is holding that currency. The shareholder of the central bank is actually extracting that from them. And so I would argue, I think central banking is the love of money, right? Almost like the institutionalized love of money, right? There's a whole organization that's putting the worldly gains of its shareholders above the flourishing of the human race that's forced to use the money. So like, it is actually the love of money, and that is why it is an evil institution.
Right.
And you could take it a step further, perhaps. Friedman said, evil is the force that believes its knowledge is complete. And central banking is the central planning of money. It's literally saying, oh no, we don't need the market to set interest rates. We will do that, right? We are smarter than the market. So it's an organization or institution that believes its knowledge is more complete than what the market can actually discover on its own. And so it's just bound up in evil, I think, in multiple ways that you look at it.
Right. And it ultimately, I guess to be blunt, not that I have an agenda, but ultimately, not agenda, but my ultimate desire, whether it comes to bear or not, that's fine. If I die tomorrow, if I die later today, that's fine, right? For all we know, Trump could have another assassination attempt that's worse than we all die. So someone, maybe China nukes the conference today and takes out America's Bitcoin strategy. Anyway, whatever the case, I don't care what the result is, but my ultimate desire is not for Bitcoin number go up. Ultimately, I want people to understand pricing things in terms of Bitcoin, not dollars. And actually, that's not my desire. My ultimate desire behind that is that not only will people start pricing things in terms of Bitcoin instead of dollars as a unit of account, but they will understand that grows the pie, that transforms your relationships and those things, right? And then my hope beyond that is that they realize what you just said about central banking. Central banking is not the fundamental problem of humanity. The state is not the fundamental problem of humanity. Sin is the fundamental problem of humanity. Being imperfect is the fundamental problem of humanity, depravity. That is the problem with humans. And all the state is, all the central bank is I really like how you put it, it is institutionalized that, right? Yeah. It is institutionalized evil, right?
Does that mean it's ineradicable then? Because sin is not eradicable, I don't think, for humans, right? We're sinful.
Yeah, we're sinful creatures.
Be sinful, so does that mean we're always going to have state and or central bank?
Well, I think this is part of the interesting discussion with the Kennedy and Trump reality now is that, on Twitter, this is part of why I was up all night, just online is reacting like crazy to Kennedy's presentation because, of course, everyone was surprised by Kennedy's desire to buy 4 million Bitcoin just as much or even more than I was. And a lot of people saying, oh, this is, Bitcoiners pandering to politicians. This is no better than, a demographic based on state, skin color, sex, or college education, whatever, pandering to a politician, right? The Bitcoiners now know better, right? They're, pandering, the U.S. government buying 4 million Bitcoin. You're just funding the state, the war machine, this and that, the other, blah, 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 blah. And I understand that emphasis really well, and that's a fine line. But ultimately, again, that's why behind the number go up, behind the unit of account, behind understanding that's why I think that distinction is so important, because the real problem is not the state. The real problem is the evil that the state does, right? I would rather, what is better? The United States of America today that is on a fiat standard, or a United States of America 50 years from now with weapons 10 times more destructive and a population 3 times greater. So, theoretically more people that could be, censored or whatever. But that America is on a Bitcoin standard, and that government does not control the world by printing tokens and distributing them and managing oil and allowing this starvation and allowing that revolution and putting this person in charge over here and these dictatorships and crushing those democracies. Instead of that, what if we have an America state 50 years from now that's way more powerful both technologically and in global influence, but that state is only powerful in that sense because it has to convince taxpayers to pay the money. I can't force your Bitcoin from you. I have to convince you to
provide
right?
good services.
Right. So anyway, that is probably controversial, but that's a difference I personally have with Bitcoiners. I do think that the state will become increasingly more relevant over time as technology progresses. I think that's probably what's going to happen, but that's a really long time from now. But again, that's just a distinction I'm making, that this whole fix the money, fix the world, I really empathize and understand with the mindset. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin, fix the money, fix the world. What is world? Well, the world that we're referring to is institutionalized fiat theft, right? And I like how you put it, where it's representing that love of money, right? See, this is the thing that I think is ironic about it, is that central banks are not the love of money because there's money involved. It has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with subverting God's authority. The central bank is not the representation of the love of money because they make political currency units. It's a representation of the love of money because it is a person sitting in a chair and saying, let there be light.
Yeah, it's literal fiat.
Right.
Yeah,
fiat by decree, I am the God of your tokens. Let's print energy out of thin air.
Yeah.
That's why it's the love of money, because the love of money has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with subverting the authority of God and subverting the desire for God over everything else.
Yeah.
So anyway.
No, that's a great point. And people might not know that, but that's where the term fiat comes from, right? Fiat lux is I think Latin for let there be light, right? How God decreed everything into existence. So fiat currency, fiat regulation, fiat legislation, like what is that? That's humans thinking they can just speak things into existence and then impose them by threat on other humans. It's like, it's crazy. Children don't allow fiat, right? If you come into a game and they're playing imaginary, and one kid's like, "No, you're the helicopter, and I'm the train."
No,
it's
I'm
no,
not.
the kid's like, "No, I'm the alligator." Like, fuck off.
Shut up.
Yeah, it's a consensual game of imagination that we're playing. You can't force someone to be a thing. Yet, I don't know. It's become the mainstay of adult reality.
Yeah. Well, and see, again, I think this is, I think at first it might seem like semantics to people, but I really think when one separates the state is the fundamental problem to sin is the fundamental problem, I think that opens up a whole different way of looking at Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because then you realize, oh wait, centralization is not bad. It's the sin that's bad, right? I mean, even if we look at Bitcoin, oh yes, Bitcoin's decentralized. Yes, that's great. That's wonderful, right? We don't want Bitcoin centralized. That's the whole point. Yes. But what are we doing? We are centralizing our allocation to Bitcoin, right? In the future, we are exiting this ancient world. We are decentralizing and diversifying our assets and purchasing power. And now we are centralizing, right? I mean, you could argue Bitcoin's a movement of decentralization because of nodes and miners and everything. But I think it's equally as valid to say that Bitcoin is a movement of centralization. We are centralizing this diversification into one monetary singularity, right?
There's a longer conversation we're going to have in Miami about this, because I a lot of questions related to that. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you centralize that much power in one place, doesn't that draw the most sinful or corrupt people towards it, like flies to the lantern? Seems to be somewhat true. There's a libertarian argument there as well. I also have questions about Christ as like, even in a purely atheistic viewpoint, if humans are hyper imitative, then don't we need like an ideal role model to imitate? And could Christ be that? So there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about. But however, I've already kept you longer than I promised.
or more so, I kept you longer. Yeah.
Yeah. So
if we have a minute, can I don't think we ever answered the question, are you too late to Bitcoin? Can we for a couple minutes?
Let's hit it.
So why are people not too late to Bitcoin, right? And I do want to bring up the church, since I guess it's now related to this conversation. The reason people are not too late to Bitcoin is because it's just two technological eras, right? This phone in my hand, we were just talking before, or at the beginning of our recording here, this is very new in our lives, but this is going to be gone in 50 years, right? This is a fleeting bridge from the ancient to the far future, right? The ancient is unimaginable to us, right? Can you imagine leaving this now, right? You can't, right? And can we imagine the next thing after this? I don't think we can either, right? And so Bitcoin, right now, it is in that period. There were thousands of years where we did not have Bitcoin, and then there's going to be some indeterminate time beyond hyper-Bitcoinization. Michael Saylor would say 100,000 years, but whatever it is going to be, until we innovate out of it somehow, which I don't actually know how we would do. But we have a very narrow window right now where we're pricing Bitcoin in terms of dollars, and we have this weird period where we assume these things are the same, right? But they're not, right? The very beginnings of computers, were starting up when, technically still the telegraph was still dying, still going down, right? And it's like trying to price, the computers and eventually the internet in terms of telegraph. It's not compatible, right? So if we just really quickly go through some numbers in regards to the Kennedy announcement yesterday alone, 21 million Bitcoin, 1 million Satoshi coins, probably 4 million lost, 1.7 million Bitcoin in exchanges. Kennedy wants to buy 4 million. Obviously, the odds of that happening this election, we'll see. We'll see what Trump says in a mere couple hours here. But everyone watching can forget that. 1.7 million Bitcoin on exchanges, 70 million millionaires. That's 3 million Satoshis per millionaire. If those Satoshis...
0.3 Bitcoin.
Right, 0.03 Bitcoin on average per millionaire. Forget the ultra high net worths with over 30 million. And keep in mind, there's a lot less ultra high net worths, but they got, every one ultra high net worth, the orange pill, is 30 millionaires, the orange pill, right? And my hunch is that there's a lot of those ultra high net worths here at this conference right now. And I've had dinner with a few of them. I think there's way more that I don't think anybody knows. And then, of course, the billionaires and nation states, forget all that, right? People come to me at my work, right? Both at Blockware, for mining. Big criticism is that, oh wow, Blockware is great. But I don't want to buy a rig. I don't need it. I only make $200 worth of Satoshis every month, right? I mean, yeah, I know it's hosted mining. It's really easy, blah, 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 whatever. And the electricity is pretty cheap, 7 cents a kilowatt hour. Yeah. Okay. But I'm going to pass on it because, 200,000 sats a month or whatever, that just doesn't cut it for me, right? Or whatever. But unfortunately, I think that's not long enough term mindset, right? Or likewise with the Bitcoin advisor, this is something that I've been focusing on a lot, in particular in this conference here, is litigation. And litigation prevention, right? Because I'm very concerned, and I'm increasingly concerned, that there is this entire other risk to Bitcoin, this other single point of failure to Bitcoin that most Bitcoiners are not considering, right? Most Bitcoiners are aware you have to take self-custody, you have to have your UTXO management down, you need estate planning, you need inheritance planning, you need to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row for all of these things from, a tax perspective, from a death tax perspective, from the custody perspective, all that. But there's this whole other world too. And it's just the reality. If you're going to become a high net worth person, you're going to deal with the reality that people are going to sue you. People are going to come after you, whether you're right or whether you're wrong. I know both of us have had, controversies and dramas in our own lives, and most people watching us have had dramas in their own lives at some point. If you own one Bitcoin, that is at least 33 times more Bitcoin than the average millionaire is going to have. I would argue closer to 300 times more Bitcoin than the average millionaire is going to have. Because again, Those 3 million sats for one millionaire, on average, is neglecting a Pareto distribution. It's neglecting the billionaires, high net worths, and the nation states like Kennedy. You get one Bobby Kennedy or potentially one Donald Trump. If Donald Trump makes a similar claim to Kennedy, you get him in office, everything I'm saying changes dramatically, right? And my point is, people come to me and they say, oh, I don't need to take estate planning seriously. I don't need to take tax planning seriously. I don't need to have jurisdictional key arbitrage for my Bitcoin seriously because I only have half a Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. I only have 20 Bitcoin. I only have 200 Bitcoin. I only have 8 Bitcoin. Whatever their answer is. I've heard it for all of those things, right? I don't have enough, right? And again, this comes back to emotion. People will say things to themselves that are not logical because of emotion. And unfortunately, many people in Bitcoin have been so beaten down by fiat or so used to not being an ultra high net worth person that they don't understand that if you're right about Bitcoin, and I think you're right about Bitcoin, you're about to become a high net worth person. Mm-hmm. And you're about to be thrown into a whole world that respectfully, I don't think most Bitcoiners are prepared for, right? So let's say theoretically someone's got, 1 to 20 coins or whatever, and let's say price goes up. Let's say we get a president, green candle, right? As Kennedy said, maybe Michael Saylor's Treasury Secretary, green candles, right? Mm-hmm. Bitcoin goes vertical. It's what we all want, right? It's the clickbait, whatever. But the problem though is that, well, now getting back to the central banking, love of money, all of the parasites that were infesting the banking sector, all of the lawsuit sharks, all of those people that make a living off of taking advantage of others and don't have those, like there is a whole industry of people out there that if they think that your paperwork's not up to date, if they think that there's a thread they can pull on, if they think that they can just keep prosecuting,
Once they sniff the money,
right?
There's a whole, it's like throwing chum in the water, right? The sharks come circling.
Yeah, they might have you lose, half your Bitcoin to the lawyer fees, and then they'll take the other half, or you'll settle half of it with them, whatever the case. And so, that's my, all these things, right? This all comes back down to the very first Twitter thread I ever made about Bitcoin. Now, I'll say it again here. You have less in common with your near future than the past. That is true for this. That is true for technology. We're on this multi-millennia exponential curve of technology. You have less technologically in common with your near future than the distant past or distant ancestors, right? 800 years ago, we were mining 6 tons of gold globally per year. Now we're mining 3,600, okay? Like I said, I've been awake for, about 30 hours or so. Like we have literally mined more gold in the time I've been awake than all of the world's empires 800 years ago did in the entire year when they were on a gold standard. We're not on a gold standard, right? So we have less in common with the near future than the past technologically. Also in our personal lives, we have less in common with the near future than the past, right? I've lived 25 years without kids, without a wife. Let's say I get married in a couple of years. I have less in common with my near future than the past, right? So it's true on a personal level. And my encouragement for people watching this, especially those in Bitcoin, especially if they've gotten to a sat stacking goal that they're really proud about, is to accept the risks to your Bitcoin. You have less in common with the near future than the past, right? Your biggest risk to Bitcoin, the biggest risks to your Bitcoin stack you've had thus far probably have very little in common with the next risk, right? Maybe your biggest risk so far is you lent it out in BlockFi, maybe you lost it on an exchange, maybe you did that, maybe those were your risks, you increase your education. Now you have to keep in mind the new things, right? What about my estate planning? What about my tax planning? What about the lawsuit litigation? What about jurisdictional arbitrage? What about UTXO management? All those things, right? And so that's my encouragement for Bitcoiners to start to think about, right? Because ultimately, this event here is very exciting. It's, clickbait, number go up, Kennedy was spy Bitcoin, Trump, I'm sure is going to say some bullish stuff this afternoon. But my encouragement to people and the parting message here is that this idea I keep musing on obsessively of less than common future in the past is an optimistic statement, but it's also a friendly and loving warning that everything is a trade-off. Like we started this conversation.
With great power comes great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility, right? And in the same way we started this conversation that social media is changing our society faster, that has downsides and upsides, I think it's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? If you want to get really, really wildly rich in Bitcoin, congratulations, you probably have stacked enough Bitcoin. Your new task is don't lose it. So that's why I work at Bitcoin Advisor, that's why I work at Blockware, and that's why I highly encourage people take these things seriously, and that they're not too late to Bitcoin. But when they realize they're not too late to Bitcoin, then they realize they have to take the responsibility of being this incredibly early.
Well, so it's true what they say. More money, more problems.
Yeah, more money, more problems, but hopefully the problems become better problems, right? I mean, obviously, it's
just anticipate them and deal with them. Like it's
right.
It's part of, I think, just growing up in general, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's like most of these problems I'm describing, they're easy fixes. UTXO management, that's easy to fix, right? The legal litigate, like basically what we do at Bitcoin Advisors, we have 3 keys in the multi-sig vault in 3 different countries. So that way, if someone's gonna, like, if I'm one of these lawsuit sharks, why would I sue you, Robert? Oh, wait, you talked about how you have a multi-sig where you have 3 keys in 3 different countries. I look, I kind of sniff around. Why would I throw a lawsuit at you? Why would I have to file a lawsuit in 3 different countries against you? I'll go after Jimmy over there. He's still on Coinbase. I'll go after Bobby over there. Yeah. He's got it all in a hot wall. I'll go after them. They have a self-directed multi-sig in one country, right?
Low-hanging fruit, basically.
Yeah, don't be the low-hanging fruit. Yeah. So anyway, that's my end point. Is these things are really simple to do, and I don't care if people do it on their own, or they hire somebody to do it. I appreciate your support of the Bitcoin Advisor, of course, but ultimately, I just want people to do it. I don't care if they do it for free and spend X number of hours doing it on their own and potentially making mistakes along the way, or if they have a professional do it. I don't care what they do, but I hope they do one of those 2, because if they don't do one of those 2, the third option is they're going to lose it. So
there's your warning. Yeah, everybody. Luke. Yep. Thank you so much.
Robert, really appreciate it. Thanks for making the time. I know that this conference is crazy and you could have been in 100 places, so it means a lot.
It's been fun, man. Appreciate it. We'll do a longer one in Miami.
Okay. All right. As if this wasn't long enough. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.